Hello guys, welcome to my channel where stories filled with revenge, moral lessons, and love are told. Make sure you like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you never miss another story. I never imagined I'd be sitting here, telling this part of my life to strangers, but sometimes speaking out is the only way to make sense of the pain. My name is Evelyn Hart, I'm 34 years old, and a widow. My husband, Nathaniel, passed away just 4 months ago, and though time has moved forward, I feel as if I'm still standing in the doorway of that hospital room, frozen in the moment they told me he was gone. Nathaniel wasn't just my husband, he was my safe place, my home. We'd been married for 11 years, building a life that looked so solid from the outside that people often called us the perfect couple. But perfection, as I've learned, can hide cracks so deep they swallow you whole. Nathaniel and I had faced our share of storms, the biggest being our struggle to have children. After years of tests, tears, and treatments, we made the difficult choice to stop trying. 2 years ago, Nathaniel had a vasectomy, something we decided together after the emotional toll became too heavy. We grieved, but we also found new ways to fill our lives traveling, volunteering, focusing on our careers. Still, the ache of never hearing a child call me mom never really left. And maybe that's why what happened next cut as deeply as it did. My younger sister, Amelia, had always been complicated. She was 2 years younger, endlessly charming, and had a way of making herself the center of attention in any room. Growing up, she competed with me over everything: grades, friends, clothes. Our parents never called it rivalry, they said she just liked to shine. I called it boundary pushing. Over the years, I learned to keep certain parts of my life private from her, because whenever she sensed an insecurity, she had a way of twisting the knife without even trying. Or maybe she tried, and I just never wanted to believe it. When Amelia announced her pregnancy 3 years ago, I remember feeling this confusing mix of joy and jealousy. Joy because she was my sister, and I wanted her to be happy. Jealousy because her news was a reminder of what I could never have. I swallowed my feelings and congratulated her. She basked in the glow, making every family gathering revolve around her growing belly. Nathaniel was kind, attentive, always asking her how she was doing. At the time, I thought it was just his good nature. Looking back, I wonder if Amelia noticed how his kindness made her feel special, and tucked that feeling away for later use. When her son, Oliver, was born, he was adorable, with big hazel eyes and a tuft of brown hair that matched Amelia's. She insisted I hold him first after our parents. I remember cradling him in my arms, feeling this strange connection, as if a tiny voice whispered, "You'll be part of his life in ways you don't understand yet." I brushed it off as sentimentality. Then Nathaniel died. It was a sudden heart attack, the doctors said. No warning signs, no time to prepare. One moment we were sitting at the kitchen table discussing what to cook for dinner, and the next, I was dialing emergency services with trembling fingers. The days after his death blurred together calls from relatives, casseroles from neighbors, the endless paperwork of death. Amelia hovered around me during the funeral, sometimes offering comfort, sometimes whispering with our parents in a way that made me feel like an outsider in my own grief. After the burial, she became oddly insistent about helping me manage the estate. At first, I thought it was a concern. But her questions were strange, asking if Nathaniel had a will, how much our house was worth, whether I planned to sell it. I brushed it off as nosiness, but her tone carried something sharper, almost like expectation. I'd inherited the house Nathaniel and I bought together, a beautiful 3-bedroom in the heart of the city. We had renovated it ourselves, every corner filled with memories. It was worth around $800,000 now, but to me, it was priceless because it held the echoes of our life together. The week before Oliver's first birthday, Amelia called me, her voice unusually cheerful. She said she wanted me to be there for the celebration, that it would mean the world to her and Oliver. I agreed, thinking it might be good for me to be around family, even if I wasn't ready for parties. I didn't know it would be the day my entire understanding of my marriage, my family, and my sister would shatter. Still deep in grief, I noticed little things about Amelia in the days leading up to the party: her expensive-looking dress, a new necklace that gleamed like it belonged in a jewelry store, and her evasive answers when I asked about her job. Something felt off. But grief has a way of dulling your instincts, and I told myself I was imagining it. The morning of the party, I stood in front of my mirror, adjusting the black dress I'd chosen not out of mourning, but because it was simple and didn't draw attention. My hair had grown dull, my eyes carried shadows from sleepless nights, but I told myself I'd put on a smile for Oliver. I grabbed a gift bag with a small set of wooden toys I thought he'd love and headed to Amelia's place. Her apartment was buzzing with chatter when I arrived. Friends, family, and neighbors crowded into the living room, balloons bobbing against the ceiling, the smell of cake wafting from the kitchen. Amelia spotted me and made a beeline over, pulling me into a hug that lingered just a little too long. "I'm so glad you came," she said, her smile almost too wide. For the next hour, I mingled, making polite conversation, all while keeping an eye on Oliver as he toddled around in his little bow tie. Amelia flitted from guest to guest like a hostess in a magazine spread. Then, just as the cake was being brought out, she cleared her throat and tapped her glass with a spoon. "I have an announcement," she said, her voice carrying over the room. The chatter died down. My stomach tightened, though I didn't know why. She turned to me, her smile shifting into something that felt almost triumphant. "I think it's time the truth came out," she began. "Oliver isn't just my son. He's Nathaniel's son." Gasps filled the room. I felt the world tilt under my feet, my ears roaring as if I were underwater. She kept talking, words spilling out in a practiced rhythm about how Nathaniel had been there for her when she needed someone, how they'd fallen into something they couldn't control. She said it all with the confidence of someone reading from a script she'd rehearsed 100 times. Then she reached into her handbag and pulled out a folded document. "And Nathaniel wanted to make sure his son was taken care of," she said, unfolding the paper and holding it up for everyone to see. "This is his will. It says Oliver is to inherit half of the house." The room erupted into whispers. My hands went cold. I stared at the paper, recognizing Nathaniel's name at the top, but even from where I stood, I could see the signature looked wrong. And in that moment, shock gave way to something else, clarity. Nathaniel had a vasectomy 2 years before Oliver was even conceived. A fact Amelia didn't know. A fact that would be her undoing. I stood there frozen, the sound of people whispering around me barely registering. My fingers gripped the edge of the table to steady myself as Amelia's words replayed in my head. I wanted to scream, to tell everyone that she was lying, but I forced myself to breathe slowly. If there was one thing grief had taught me, it was that reacting too quickly could be a mistake you couldn't take back. Amelia was watching me closely, her eyes almost daring me to challenge her in front of the entire family. I took a step forward, my voice calm though my heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. "That's quite the claim, Amelia," I said, my gaze fixed on her. "May I see this will?" Her smile tightened, but she handed it over like someone confident the evidence was on their side. The paper trembled slightly as I held it. At first glance, it looked legitimate, Nathaniel's name, the legal formatting, but as I scanned the words, I noticed inconsistencies. The phrasing didn't match the style of his original will, and the date of signing was 2 months before his death on a day I knew he had been in the hospital for a work injury, heavily medicated. I looked at the signature, and my stomach turned. It was similar, but not quite right, the angle, the spacing, even the pressure of the pen stroke felt off. Nathaniel had a particular way of signing, with a flourish at the end of the N in his first name. This signature lacked it. I kept my voice even. "I'll be keeping this for my records," I said, folding the paper neatly and slipping it into my handbag. Amelia's eyes widened. "Excuse me? That's mine." "It's evidence now," I replied smoothly. "If what you're saying is true, then we'll need to handle it legally. Surely you wouldn't want there to be any misunderstandings." Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she said nothing. Around us, the room buzzed with confusion, people exchanging glances, clearly unsure what to believe. I decided not to give her the satisfaction of a public argument. Instead, I kissed Oliver on the forehead, thanked the guests for the party, and left without another word. When I got home, I locked the door and sat at the dining table, staring at the folded document in front of me. My grief had been slowly transforming into something sharper, and now it solidified into a clear objective. I was going to expose Amelia's lies. The next morning, I visited the bank where Nathaniel and I had kept a safety deposit box. Inside were our most important documents, marriage certificates, property deeds, insurance papers, and Nathaniel's legitimate will. I laid the real will next to Amelia's version and compared them carefully. The difference was glaring. The real will left everything to me, with a clause that in the event of my passing, our assets would go to a charitable foundation in his name. There was no mention of Oliver or Amelia. But that wasn't all. I also retrieved Nathaniel's medical records, including the one confirming his vasectomy 2 years before Oliver's conception. My hands trembled as I read the surgeon's signature, remembering the day Nathaniel had made that decision, how he'd held me afterwards and told me, "We have each other, Eve. That's enough." Amelia had no idea this proof existed. I spent that afternoon calling Nathaniel's attorney, Daniel Fraser, a man I trusted implicitly. When I explained what had happened, he was silent for a moment before saying, "Bring everything to my office. And Evelyn, don't speak to her again until we have a plan." 2 days later, I sat in Daniel's office, the city skyline glinting behind him as he examined the forged will. "This is sloppy," he said, tapping the paper with his pen. "She probably thought grief would cloud your judgment enough not to notice." "I think she underestimated me," I replied quietly. "I agree. But we'll need more than just the forgery to completely shut this down. We need to know why she's doing this, and if there's anyone else involved." That's when I decided to hire a private investigator. Daniel recommended a man named Michael Quinn, a retired detective with a reputation for being relentless. We met in a small cafe downtown. He was straightforward, his gray eyes sharp and assessing. "Tell me exactly what you want," he said. "I want the truth," I told him. "I want to know why my sister would fabricate this, who put her up to it, and how deep this goes. I also want evidence strong enough to make sure she never tries this again." He nodded once. "Give me a week." While Michael began his work, I kept my distance from Amelia. I didn't block her number, I wanted to see if she'd reach out. She didn't. But I heard from my parents, who hinted that maybe I should consider Oliver's future and that if Nathaniel made mistakes, you shouldn't punish the child. It made my blood boil. Amelia had clearly started planting her narrative, and my parents were buying it. 7 days later, Michael called. "We need to meet," he said. His tone was clipped, urgent. We met again at the same cafe. He slid a folder across the table. "Your sister is in financial trouble," he began. "Eviction notice on her apartment. Credit card debt in the tens of thousands. And the father of her child? A man named Ryan Cooper. Criminal record for domestic violence, outstanding warrants for unpaid child support to another woman." I swallowed hard as he continued. "She's been texting him about this plan for months. He's the one who suggested using the will to get part of your house. I have screenshots. Here." Inside the folder were printed text messages. My breath caught as I read them. "Ryan, if you can convince her, that house is ours. Amelia, she'll believe it. She's still grieving. Ryan, make it official. Get someone to fake the will. I know a guy." The bile rose in my throat. This wasn't just desperation, it was premeditated theft. They had targeted me when I was at my weakest. I sat back, closing the folder slowly. "This is enough," I said. My voice was steady, but inside, I was burning. "It's time she knows exactly what I know." Daniel and I arranged a meeting at his office. Amelia arrived looking polished, but I saw the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes when she spotted the folder on the table. "Sit," I told her. "What's this about?" she asked, her tone defensive. I leaned forward. "I know about Ryan. I know about your debts. I know you forged this will. And I know Nathaniel couldn't possibly be Oliver's father because he had a vasectomy 2 years before your son was conceived. Her face was drained of color. That's... Don't lie, I cut in, my voice sharp enough to make her flinch. I have medical records. I have the real will. I have your texts with Ryan. She stared at me for a long moment before her shoulders sagged. The bravado crumbled. I didn't know what else to do, she whispered. Ryan left. I had nothing. I thought if I could just get the money. You thought stealing from me was the answer? My voice shook now, not from weakness but from controlled fury. You used my husband's death. You dragged his name through the mud. And you tried to take the only home I have left. Tears welled in her eyes, but I felt no sympathy. Not yet. I had one more move to make. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence hang in the air until it felt almost unbearable. Amelia shifted uncomfortably, glancing between me and Daniel as if searching for an escape route. There was none. She'd walked herself into this corner, and I was done being the sister who let things slide for the sake of family peace. I should take you to court, I said finally, my voice low but firm. Forgery, fraud, attempted theft, any one of those could put you in prison. And Ryan? He'd go down with you. She swallowed, her hands twisting in her lap. Please, Evelyn. I wasn't thinking straight. Oh, you were thinking straight, I snapped. You just didn't think I'd fight back. Daniel cleared his throat. We have enough evidence to make this a criminal case. But, Evelyn, you also have the option to settle this privately if that's your choice. I turned back to Amelia, meeting her tearful eyes. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to confess to me, to our parents, and to anyone else you've fed this lie to. You're going to admit that Nathaniel was never Oliver's father, and that you forged that will. Then you're going to cut all contact with Ryan. I'll help you get a restraining order if you need one. She looked stunned, as though she had expected me to unleash punishment without any offer of a lifeline. In return, I continued, I will not press charges. I will set up a trust fund for Oliver's education and medical needs, but it will be in my name, and you will have no access to it. I'll also help you find stable housing, but only if you enter therapy and financial counseling. And I will be part of Oliver's life, whether you like it or not. If you break any of these conditions, I'll go to the police without hesitation. Her lips parted as if to argue, but then she closed them and nodded slowly. Okay, she whispered. I'll do it. I didn't answer. I didn't thank her. I just stood, handed her a tissue, and told her to meet me at our parents' house that weekend. The dinner that Saturday was one of the most tense moments of my life. My parents were already on edge, their disapproval palpable. Amelia sat beside me, pale and quiet, as I tapped my glass for attention. There's something Amelia needs to say, I began, keeping my eyes on her. She took a deep breath, her voice trembling as she spoke. I lied, she said. Oliver isn't Nathaniel's son. The will I showed you was a fake. I made it up because I was desperate for money. My mother's fork clattered to her plate. My father's eyes widened in disbelief. Amelia, he began, but she cut him off, her tears spilling freely now. I was wrong. I know I hurt everyone, especially Evelyn. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'm going to get help. I'll be in counseling, and I'm cutting ties with Ryan. She glanced at me briefly before looking down again. The silence that followed was heavy. My parents looked at me, waiting for my reaction. This is my boundary, I said calmly. I'm helping Oliver, but I'm not rescuing Amelia from the consequences of her own choices. She's going to do the work to fix her life, and if she doesn't, I will walk away completely. They both nodded slowly, perhaps realizing for the first time that I wasn't the older sister who would smooth over every mess anymore. In the months that followed, Amelia kept to her word mostly. She started therapy, took a part-time job, and stayed away from Ryan. The trust fund for Oliver was established, with strict legal terms that left no room for manipulation. I visited him often, determined that he wouldn't be caught in the crossfire of his mother's mistakes. A year later, I found myself standing in the same dining room where Amelia had confessed, hosting a small family gathering. The atmosphere was lighter this time. Oliver was chasing his toy car across the floor, laughing, his little voice calling my name. Amelia sat quietly at the corner of the table, not the center of attention for once, but not excluded either. She had put on some weight, her eyes brighter, her posture less defensive. I knew our relationship would never be the same, and maybe that was for the best. Trust, once broken, never fully returns. But we had found a way to exist without open hostility for Oliver's sake, if nothing else. As for me, I had walked through fire and come out stronger. I sold the house Nathaniel and I had shared, not because I was forced to, but because I needed a fresh start. I bought a smaller place in a quieter neighborhood, planted a garden Nathaniel would have loved, and even adopted a rescue dog. I also created a foundation in Nathaniel's name, one that offers free legal guidance to widows who find themselves targeted after their spouse's death. It felt like the right way to honor his memory, not by holding on to the pain, but by transforming it into something that could protect others. And somewhere along the way, I met someone new. It wasn't a whirlwind romance, just a gentle, steady companionship that grew naturally. Back now, I realize Amelia's betrayal could have destroyed me if I'd let it. But instead, it became the moment I stopped living for the idea of keeping everyone happy and started living for my own peace. So, to anyone listening, document everything, trust your instincts, and never be afraid to set boundaries even with family. Love doesn't mean letting people trample over you. And if you've made it this far into my story, thank you. Please like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Moral lesson: in life, betrayal can come from the people we least expect. Protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. Love with an open heart, but guard your peace with unwavering strength, and never let guilt keep you in harm's way.